In the fog-covered streets of 19th-century England, a frail boy named Henry Royce was born into poverty, a child of grit and quiet dreams in a world that offered him little chance to rise. He came into life in 1863, in the small village of Alwalton near Peterborough, a time when Britain was booming with iron, smoke, and invention. But for families like the Royces, the Industrial Revolution meant hard labor, not opportunity. His father owned a small flour mill that supplied the nearby towns, and for a few years it sustained them. But misfortune struck early. The mill business failed, debts piled up, and what little stability they had vanished almost overnight. The Royce family, once modestly comfortable, was thrown into hardship. Henry was only a child when his father's failure changed the course of his life. His family could no longer afford to send him to school for long, and the boy who once dreamed of learning found himself forced to work. At just 9 years old, Henry left the classroom for the cold, cobbled streets. He began selling newspapers, sometimes in the bitter rain, sometimes on empty stomachs, shouting headlines to passers-by just to earn a few pennies. When that wasn't enough, he took work delivering telegrams, running from door to door through the soot-filled alleys of London, his feet sore and his hands raw. Most children would have grown bitter or hopeless, but Henry was different. Though he had no books and no teacher, he had an unbreakable curiosity, an unshakable hunger to understand how the world worked. While other boys played games or dreamed of being soldiers, Henry dreamed of machines. He loved watching the great locomotives thunder down the tracks, the pistons pumping and gears grinding in perfect rhythm. He would stare at them for hours, fascinated by the music of metal and motion. Whenever he could, he collected scraps of broken tools and discarded pieces of metal from the streets, tinkering with them late into the night. He wanted to know what made them move, what made them fail, and most of all, how to make them better. His mother, recognizing that spark, encouraged him as best she could, even though they had nothing to give him but love and belief. By the time he was a teenager, Henry had developed a gift that few boys his age possessed, the gift of mechanical intuition. He could look at a broken clock or a damaged wheel and see how it worked, how each part fit together. He was poor in every material way, but he was rich in curiosity, precision, and patience, qualities that would one day change his life. At 15, luck, or perhaps fate, intervened. A local charity, impressed by his determination, helped him secure an apprenticeship at the Great Northern Railway in London. For a boy from poverty, this was more than a job. It was a doorway to a new world. The railway workshops were loud, hot, and alive with energy. Steam hissed, hammers rang, and sparks danced from glowing metal. For most, it was harsh, dirty work. For Henry, it was heaven. The young apprentice quickly gained a reputation for being different. While others worked only for their wages, Henry worked for understanding. He stayed late to study how engines were assembled, how steam moved pistons, and how one tiny mistake could cause an entire system to fail. He asked endless questions, often to the annoyance of older workers, but his thirst for knowledge was unstoppable. He learned to measure with accuracy, to file metal with care, and to treat every component, no matter how small, as essential. Even though the work was grueling, 12-hour days surrounded by smoke, grease, and deafening noise, Henry thrived. He didn't just see machines. He felt them. He was beginning to understand the soul of engineering, the perfect marriage between art and precision. But as quickly as the opportunity had come, it vanished. The charity that sponsored his apprenticeship could no longer afford to support him, and Henry, still just a boy, was forced to leave the job that he loved. For many, that would have been the end of the story. Another poor child pushed back into obscurity. But Henry was not the kind to surrender. He took any work he could find, repairing tools, fixing lamps, building small parts for local factories, each job another chance to learn. He worked from dawn until night, saving every penny. It was during this time that Henry's character truly took shape. He refused to cut corners, no matter how small the job or how little the pay. When he built something, it was always to the best of his ability. He would often say to himself, "If I cannot do it perfectly, I will not do it at all." By his early 20s, that attitude began to pay off. People started to notice the young man who could fix anything, and not just fix it, but improve it. His hands were scarred from years of labor, but his mind was sharper than ever. Every failure had taught him something new. Every hardship had trained him to be patient, methodical, and creative. His relentless pursuit of perfection earned him respect in industrial Manchester, the city known as the workshop of the world. Though he still lived modestly, Henry Royce had built something far greater than wealth. He had built a reputation. People trusted his craftsmanship. They brought him machines others couldn't repair, and he made them work again. They came to him for advice and he gave it freely. He didn't yet know it, but this reputation would soon become the foundation of an empire. Because Henry Royce was more than just a mechanic. He was a man with vision. He saw that machines could be better, smoother, and more reliable than anyone imagined. He didn't dream of riches or fame. He dreamed of perfection, of creating something so well built that it would never fail, something that would outlast the man who made it. The young boy who once sold newspapers on London streets had grown into a self-taught engineer with the discipline of a craftsman and the mind of a pioneer. Though he had faced hunger, humiliation, and endless setbacks, he carried no resentment, only determination. Every obstacle was fuel for his ambition. Every piece of machinery he touched brought him closer to the destiny he was quietly forging. Soon, his name, Henry Royce, would stand for more than survival. It would stand for excellence. From the fog and poverty of his childhood, he had begun a journey that would lead him to create a car so flawless, so enduring, that more than a century later, the world would still whisper his name in awe. The boy who fixed broken toys was about to build a machine that would define luxury itself. By the late 1880s, the smog-filled city of Manchester had become Henry Royce's new world, a place where dreams were forged from iron and ambition. The air smelled of oil, steam, and hard work. Factories rumbled day and night, their chimneys spitting fire into the gray skies. For most, Manchester was a brutal place, loud, dirty, and unforgiving. But for Henry, it was full of possibility. It was here, amid the noise and chaos, that his destiny began to take shape. He was in his early 20s now, still living modestly. But he had something far more valuable than wealth, a reputation for excellence. Word had spread through the workshops and factories that there was a quiet young man who could make any machine run smoother, faster, and more efficiently than anyone else. Henry's workbench, small and humble, was always piled with half-repaired motors, electrical parts, and intricate pieces of metal. He often worked by candlelight, his eyes straining as he filed, adjusted, and reassembled each piece by hand. Then, in 1884, Henry decided to take the greatest risk of his life. With only $20 in savings, the equivalent of a few months' wages, he opened a tiny workshop with a friend named Ernest Claremont. Together, they founded a small company called F.H. Royce & Company. It wasn't grand, just a single room tucked away in a quiet Manchester street. But for Henry, it was a palace. He began building electric doorbells, dynamos, and small motors, products that were still relatively new to the world. Electricity was the future, and Henry was determined to master it. He worked tirelessly, often sleeping at the workshop, eating little more than bread and tea. He designed his own tools, rewound motors by hand, and tested every item himself. When a part didn't meet his standards, he scrapped it, no matter how much time or money it cost. His motto was simple but powerful. Whatever you make it the best in the world. Those words became the heartbeat of everything he did. Slowly, customers began to take notice. His motors didn't just work, they worked flawlessly. They ran smoother, lasted longer, and needed fewer repairs than anything else on the market. Within a few years, F.H. Royce & Company had grown, hiring skilled workers and moving into a larger building. Business was steady, but Henry was never satisfied. By the turn of the century, automobiles were starting to appear on the roads of England. They were rare, expensive, and unreliable, more toys for the wealthy than practical machines. The engines rattled, the suspensions shook, and breakdowns were constant. Most people saw them as a novelty. Henry Royce saw them as a challenge. In 1901, he purchased a small French car, a Decauville, for his personal use. It was a finely built machine by the standards of the day, elegant but flawed. Henry was both fascinated and frustrated by it. He loved the idea of the automobile, but the constant failures annoyed him. It was noisy, unstable, and temperamental. Most people would have shrugged it off as just how cars are. Henry couldn't accept that. So, in his usual fashion, he took the Decauville apart piece by piece. For weeks, he studied every nut, bolt, and piston, analyzing why it failed and how it could be better. He worked in silence, surrounded by sketches, diagrams, and parts scattered across his workshop floor. Then, with the precision of an artist and the discipline of an engineer, he began to build his own car. one that would correct every flaw he had found. By 1904, his creation was ready. It was a 2-cylinder, 10-horsepower automobile, small, simple, and extraordinarily well made. When Henry took it out for a test drive, people turned to stare. It ran almost silently, gliding across the cobblestones without the usual clattering or smoke. It was not just another car. It was a masterpiece of engineering. Around this time, a man named Charles Rolls entered the picture. Rolls was everything Henry was not: wealthy, well-educated, and from an aristocratic family. He was a racing enthusiast, a risk-taker, and one of Britain's earliest car dealers. He imported luxury French cars for London's elite, but he was frustrated by how unreliable they were. When a mutual friend, Henry Edmonds, told Rolls about a remarkable car built by a quiet engineer in Manchester, he was intrigued. In May of 1904, the two men met for the first time at the Midland Hotel in Manchester, a meeting that would change automotive history forever. Henry Royce arrived modestly, dressed simply and speaking softly. Rolls, tall and confident, was immediately struck by Royce's calm authority. When Royce showed him his car, Rolls was stunned. The engine purred with a smoothness he had never heard before. The craftsmanship was immaculate, the handling precise. After a short drive, Rolls turned to Royce and said, "I will sell every car you can make." That handshake sealed a partnership that would give birth to one of the most legendary names in history, Rolls-Royce Limited. Together, they combined two worlds, Rolls's vision and charm with Royce's genius and precision. In 1906, they officially formed the company, with Royce overseeing design and engineering, while Rolls handled marketing and sales. Just a year later, they unveiled a car that would become immortal, the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. The Silver Ghost wasn't just a car, it was a revolution. With its 6-cylinder engine, it ran so quietly that a coin placed on its running motor wouldn't fall. In 1907, it completed a 15,000-mile endurance test without a single mechanical failure, a feat unheard of at the time. The press hailed it as the best car in the world. Wealthy buyers from across Europe and America lined up to own one. Rolls-Royce became a symbol of perfection, prestige, and reliability. Yet even as success poured in, Henry remained the same humble craftsman he had always been. He still worked tirelessly in the workshop, inspecting every detail. Rolls, meanwhile, pursued his passion for flight, becoming one of Britain's aviation pioneers. But tragedy struck in 1910 when Charles Rolls was killed in a plane crash, the first British pilot to die in an aviation accident. Henry was devastated. Though their partnership had lasted only 6 years, their legacy would endure for centuries. Royce continued his work with renewed determination. During World War I, Rolls-Royce engines powered British aircraft, cementing the brand's reputation for reliability and excellence. Even as his health declined, Henry refused to slow down. He designed from his bed, sketching new engine concepts while dictating notes to his assistants. He would not allow imperfection to exist under his name. When Henry Royce passed away in 1933, his employees placed a sign in his workshop that read, "The quality remains long after the price is forgotten." It was more than a motto, it was his life's truth. The poor boy who once sold newspapers in London's cold streets had risen to create the greatest symbol of luxury and engineering the world had ever known. Rolls-Royce became more than a company. It became a standard by which all others were measured. And even today, more than a century later, every time a Rolls-Royce glides silently down the road, it carries with it the soul of that determined boy, Henry Royce, who refused to accept mediocrity and dared to build perfection from nothing. By the time Charles Rolls tragically lost his life in 1910, Henry Royce was no longer just an engineer. He was the driving force behind the world's most respected name in motoring. Yet, even with success, Henry's heart was never set on fame or fortune. His passion remained what it had always been, the relentless pursuit of perfection. While others celebrated wealth and luxury, Royce spent his days, and many sleepless nights, in his workshop, sketching new designs and improving old ones. His health, however, began to fail under the constant strain. The man who had once worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk now suffered from exhaustion and illness. Doctors urged him to slow down, but Henry could not bear to step away from his machines. When his body grew too weak to stay in Manchester, he moved to the quieter countryside of West Wittering in Sussex, where the air was fresh and calm. But even there, his mind never rested. Rolls-Royce engineers would visit him regularly, bringing drawings, blueprints, and prototypes to his bedside. Henry would study them with intense focus, making corrections and improvements, often redrawing entire designs with trembling hands. To him, quality was sacred, something never to be compromised. He famously told his team, "Take the best that exists and make it better. If it doesn't exist, create it." Under his guidance, Rolls-Royce grew from a small company to a symbol of engineering mastery. Each car that left the factory was treated like a work of art. The process of building a single vehicle could take months, sometimes years, because nothing was rushed. Royce's obsession with quiet engines, flawless performance, and refined elegance created a new standard, not just for cars, but for craftsmanship itself. To own a Rolls-Royce was to own perfection, and the wealthy elite from London to New York to Bombay wanted one. Kings, queens, and industrial magnates all clamored for his cars, and yet Henry himself lived simply, more content in the hum of machinery than in luxury. During World War I, his genius took on a new purpose. The British government turned to Rolls-Royce to develop reliable aircraft engines. Royce, frail but undeterred, led his engineers in designing the Eagle engine, a masterpiece that would power some of Britain's most successful aircraft. The Eagle engine's reliability helped secure the skies for the Allies and set new records for endurance and performance. It was a defining moment for the company, proving that the same standards of excellence that defined Rolls-Royce automobiles could conquer the air as well. After the war, Henry Royce's vision didn't stop at cars or airplanes. He dreamed of engines that would redefine what machines could achieve. Engines that would run with the smoothness of silk, quiet as a whisper, yet powerful enough to move mountains. He continued to mentor his engineers, designing through correspondence and sketches when his health prevented travel. They would bring him parts to examine, and even from his bed he would find ways to improve them. His assistants described how he could sense mechanical imperfections just by the feel of a component in his hands. To them, he was not just an engineer, he was an artist of motion. In 1931, Rolls-Royce acquired Bentley Motors, another prestigious brand, ensuring that his engineering philosophy would extend even further. By this time, Henry was already a legend, though he never acted like one. He detested waste, shortcuts, or showmanship. Every bolt, every gear, every finish in a Rolls-Royce had to meet his impossibly high standards. When a young engineer once told him, "This is good enough," Royce simply replied, "Good enough is never good enough." As the 1930s advanced, Henry's health deteriorated further, but his spirit burned as bright as ever. Even in his final years, he continued sketching designs, dreaming of better engines and lighter aircraft. On April 22, 1933, Sir Frederick Henry Royce passed away at the age of 70. His death marked the end of an era, but not the end of his influence. His engineers wept, not just for their mentor, but for a man who had turned perfection into a way of life. After his passing, the company he founded continued to flourish. Rolls-Royce became not just a name, but a legend, the gold standard for excellence in both automobiles and aviation. The engines designed under Royce's principles went on to power some of the world's most iconic machines, from luxury cars to warplanes that changed the course of history. His design philosophy, precision, reliability, and beauty in every detail, became the cornerstone of Rolls-Royce's identity. In the decades that followed, Rolls-Royce expanded beyond imagination. It became a powerhouse in aerospace engineering, developing jet engines that powered commercial airliners, military aircraft, and even spacecraft systems. Yet every innovation still carried the spirit of Henry Royce, that same insistence on doing things the right way, never the easy way. His vision shaped generations of engineers who carried forward his legacy of excellence and discipline. Today, over a century after a poor boy from Alwalton first dreamed of machines, the Rolls-Royce name still stands as the ultimate symbol of perfection. The company produces cars of unmatched luxury and aircraft engines that carry millions safely across the skies. The spirit of ecstasy that adorns the hood of every Rolls-Royce is not just a symbol of wealth. It's a tribute to the relentless spirit of a man who refused to give up. Henry Royce's story remains one of the most inspiring rags to riches journeys in history, a testament to what human will, passion, and integrity can achieve. He began life with nothing but determination, yet he left behind a legacy worth billions and a name that defines quality itself. His life reminds us that greatness is not inherited, nor is it bought. It is built. One careful turn of the wrench, one sleepless night, one impossible dream at a time. The poor boy who once sold newspapers on the streets of London built more than a company. He built a standard, a promise that anything bearing his name would be nothing short of the best. And even now, long after his passing, the whisper of that promise can still be heard in every Rolls-Royce engine that hums to life. A quiet tribute to Henry Royce, the man who turned poverty into perfection and a dream into an everlasting legend. After Henry Royce's passing in 1933, the world of engineering mourned a quiet genius, a man who had reshaped both luxury and innovation through sheer willpower and an uncompromising eye for perfection. Yet though his hands were gone, his spirit remained etched into the very soul of Rolls-Royce. His company did not crumble after his death. It soared higher, propelled by the foundation he had so carefully built. Every blueprint, every principle, and every word of advice he left behind guided generations of engineers who shared one goal: to keep the Rolls-Royce name synonymous with excellence without equal. As the 20th century marched forward, Rolls-Royce continued to dominate the world of motoring. The cars of the 1940s and 1950s, such as the Silver Dawn, the Phantom 4, and the Silver Cloud, became symbols of post-war luxury. They were not just cars, they were rolling pieces of art, handcrafted with obsessive care, built not on assembly lines but by master artisans. Every stitch in the leather, every curve of the chrome, every whisper of the engine echoed Henry Royce's philosophy. Perfection cannot be rushed. To own a Rolls-Royce was to own a statement of taste, power, and legacy, but even beyond automobiles, the company's brilliance truly took flight. The seeds Royce had planted in the world of aviation continued to grow, and Rolls-Royce became the world's foremost name in aircraft engines. During the Second World War, their Merlin engine, a direct descendant of Royce's engineering principles, powered some of the most legendary aircraft ever built, including the Supermarine Spitfire and the Hawker Hurricane, the very machines that defended Britain in its darkest hour. Those engines didn't just run. They roared with reliability, courage, and precision. Pilots often said, if you had a Rolls-Royce engine, you knew you'd make it home. That legacy cemented Rolls-Royce as not just a luxury brand, but a national treasure, a symbol of British resilience and craftsmanship. After the war, the company entered a new era of progress. In the 1950s and 1960s, it developed jet engines that revolutionized aviation, powering commercial airliners that carried people across continents with the same grace and dependability as its cars carried royalty through the streets. The name Rolls-Royce now represented two worlds, one of elegance and another of engineering might. However, no empire is without its trials. In the early 1970s, the company faced severe financial difficulties after investing heavily in new jet engine technologies. The ambitious RB211 project nearly bankrupted Rolls-Royce. The British government had to intervene, nationalizing the company in 1971 to save one of its most prized institutions. It was a dark time, a test of whether Henry Royce's ideals could survive in a modern, fast-changing world. But they did. Through perseverance, innovation, and a return to quality above all else, Rolls-Royce rebuilt itself, proving once again that greatness endures when built on integrity. In the decades that followed, the company evolved, split into two entities: Rolls-Royce plc, focusing on aerospace and defense engineering, and Rolls-Royce Motor Cars, continuing the tradition of luxury automobiles. The motorcar division went through various ownerships, including Vickers and then BMW. But no matter who held the keys, the legacy of Henry Royce remained untouched. BMW's stewardship in the 21st century ushered in a renaissance for the brand. The reintroduction of models like the Phantom, Ghost, Wraith, and Cullinan redefined modern luxury while maintaining the same standard that Royce himself demanded more than a century earlier: absolute perfection. Today, when a Rolls-Royce glides silently down the street, its presence is unmistakable. The spirit of ecstasy, that graceful silver figure leaning into the wind, leads the way like a guardian angel of legacy and innovation. Inside, the world fades away into handcrafted leather, rare woods, and bespoke artistry that takes hundreds of hours to perfect. Beneath that serene surface beats the heart of an engineering masterpiece, one that traces its lineage back to a boy who once sold newspapers in the cold streets of London. But perhaps the most extraordinary evolution of all is how Rolls-Royce continues to look forward. The company that began with steam and steel now stands at the edge of a new age, developing hybrid technologies, electric powertrains, and next-generation aerospace systems. From jet engines that drive commercial airliners to experimental power systems that could one day take humanity into space, Rolls-Royce remains a symbol of progress, innovation done the right way. And through every stage of this remarkable journey, the ghost of Henry Royce's philosophy lingers. Strive for perfection in everything you do. That line, more than any machine or model, is his true legacy. It reminds the world that success is never about shortcuts. It is about passion, patience, and pride in one's craft. The same spirit that guided Royce's trembling hands in his small Manchester workshop now guides thousands of engineers, artisans, and visionaries around the world. When you see a Rolls-Royce, you are not just looking at a car. You are looking at a century of dreams realized, a living monument to the belief that greatness comes from refusing to settle for anything less than the best. You are looking at Henry Royce's story, a story that began in poverty, was forged in persistence, and continues to inspire every generation that dares to dream. From the soot-filled alleys of 19th century England to the shimmering showrooms of modern luxury, from the roar of piston engines to the whisper of electric ones, the journey of Rolls-Royce is proof that even the humblest beginnings can lead to unimaginable heights. The poor boy who once took apart broken clocks created a brand that still defines perfection over 100 years later. Henry Royce may be gone, but every time a Rolls-Royce engine hums, whether on the road or in the skies, it carries with it a piece of his soul. His dream lives on, not in museums or monuments, but in motion, in craftsmanship, and in the eternal pursuit of excellence. Because Rolls-Royce is not just a company, it is the embodiment of one man's belief that anything, no matter how impossible, can be made perfect.